Welcome to Leading for Life Stories, Season 3. I'm Bob Judson. I'm the host for this podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you here joining me. Regardless of whether you're a seasoned listener who's been with me since the beginning, or whether you've just dropped in for the occasional episode, I really hope you enjoyed the mix of content that I provide, the personal stories, the thematic episodes, and the guests that I have on the show. And I hope you find it all interesting and at least some of it useful. And without further ado, let's go. Welcome back, everybody. Is your glass half full or is your glass half empty? That's the question I want you to ponder for this episode. It's the first time I've done a thematic episode in 2025. I'm prompted to do it by a couple of things, really. One is next week I head off to Denmark with KWC Global, who I work with periodically, to go and deliver some training to Deloitte Denmark. And I'm really looking forward to that, to the Senior Consultant Academy. And one of the things that we talk about is relationship management and optimism versus pessimism as part of that. And I'll come back to that in a little while, because I think it's a really interesting area to dwell on a little bit. The other reason I thought of doing this week is in my own life right now. I mean, I'm facing a couple of challenges in terms of finding sufficient work that is going to pay the mortgage and pay the bills. And my pipeline is not as full as I want it to be, and I'm looking to change that. And in doing that, of course, it's very easy to be too negative and to look at things as, oh, I'm getting old, I'm going to struggle to get any kind of employment, no one's going to want me because other people are filling the marketplace, and the world is full of woe, and the economy is not going very well, and the world order is in a terrible place. And it's really easy to get sucked into that kind of difficult situation. And one of the things I find very interesting about it is the difference in people. So I am inherently very optimistic, probably in some ways too optimistic in certain instances. And I don't look backwards. I tend to look forwards. But I deal with other people regularly. I have people in my personal life and my professional life who are very different to me, look at things very differently to me, and have a very different perspective on all of this stuff. And that's caused me to reflect a little bit more on this whole issue of optimism versus pessimism, glass half full versus glass half empty. Are you full of regret or are you full of hope? Do you look forwards or do you look backwards too much? Are you decisive or are you indecisive because you can't make up your mind? You're worried about making a wrong decision and what's going to be the impact of all of that. Are you comfortable with ambiguity? Are you always looking for certainty? Those things are all opposites. And it's really interesting to see how often optimists tend to be glass half full. They tend to be full of hope. They tend to be forward-looking. They tend to be decisive. They tend to be pretty comfortable with ambiguity, because it doesn't matter if you make a mistake and you change your mind downstream and you need to do something different. Whereas pessimists are much more in the glass half empty space. They're much more full of regret because they wish they'd done this, they wish they'd done that. They're backward looking by definition as a result of that. And that can make them quite indecisive because they're worried about making a mistake. They're not comfortable with ambiguity. They're looking for certainty, because if they get that, then they've got a better chance of being sure they're taking the right path. All of this stuff matters to you because it affects your personal well-being in a major way. And it's worth thinking quite hard about how that is going to impact you longer term. If you are inherently pessimistic, and in some worlds, if you're in the world of consultancy, for example, you are to some extent predisposed to be quite pessimistic because you're always looking to solve problems for clients. And so you're looking for weak spots, you're looking for negativity, you're looking for challenges. Whereas obviously what you want to start thinking about is, how can I bring that more positive outlook on everything? How can I be more in the half full, not half empty space permanently? And if you can be in that space, then that is a much, much nicer place for you to be, I think. Personal view, you may disagree with me, and that's just fine if you do. But I think it's inherently a more comfortable space to be if you're feeling comfortable, confident, happy, and not worried about everything constantly. And you can obviously take that to extreme. You can be too laissez-faire about it and walk into disasters because you're basically being naive about it and overly optimistic and taking the view that everything's going to be all right when patently it won't be, and not catering for the challenges that potentially are there and not contingency planning for things, etc. I'm not advocating that. I'm definitely advocating you need to think about this a little bit and make sure you're being realistic. But when, for example, we talk to the Danish participants next week when I'm with KWC Global, we will talk about one of the 7 principles of relationship management that KWC has as a part of its process. Be optimistic and accentuate the positive. Don't be in a situation where you start thinking of disappointment, whatever that may be, whether it's a networking conversation that didn't go well, whether it's a meeting that didn't go well, whether it's a particular piece of work you've bid for that you didn't get the result you wanted. Don't think of that as permanent. Don't think of it as pervasive, that affects everything. Don't think of it as personal. It's probably none of those things. It's probably, and the optimist is going to look at it this way, temporary. It's one of those things that's a setback. So what? We can move on from it. It's specific to that particular thing. They didn't like that because it was too expensive. They weren't ready for it. They didn't particularly want that conversation with you at this particular time. And they certainly don't necessarily think it's personal. An optimist is going to take the view that this is just one of those things. It happens. And therefore, fine, move on, look at for the next opportunity another day. And I think that's a really, really valuable life lesson for everyone to reflect on. Even the optimists, just look at yourself a little bit. Look at how full is your glass? Is it really half full? Are you convincing yourself it's half full? Or is it actually that you're more pessimistic and you're talking yourself up? Or indeed, are you the other way around, that you're excessively optimistic when you really should be thinking my glass is actually pretty much empty, but I'm still being hopelessly optimistic? Checking in on yourself is important here. Think about the stress management aspects of this as well. You need to consider knowing yourself in this space quite well. Are you good at assessing when you are really feeling under pressure? Or do you need other people to help you with that and give you a few pointers? In which case, have you actually empowered those people to turn around and help you to make that decision, to realize that you need to take some time out to rethink what you're doing? Because if you're not good at it yourself, you definitely need to think about how you're going to deal with that. You need to think about that forks in the road thing. Everyone comes across this routinely. There are forks in the road. Do I go left? Do I go right? Which one's going to be the best one? What do I do when I get a mile down one particular road and then wish I'd gone down the other fork? Am I then going to look forward or am I going to look backwards? One of the podcasts I did a long while ago now was with Ralph and Henry Arundel, and Ralph came up with a wonderful phrase. He said, it's okay to look back, but just don't stare. And I think that's so true. That's such a great way of putting it, that you need to think about how forward-looking you are versus how reflective you are looking backwards. If you constantly wish, if only, then that is going to lead to a life of disappointment if you're not careful. So be cautious in this space. Be conscious of your own behavior. And if you find this hard, then find people who can help give you some clarity and to bring you into a better space if you're too negative yourself. Surrounding yourself with people who are equally pessimistic is going to be even more damaging, probably long term. Now, equally, being overly optimistic and surrounding yourself permanently with optimists who are only going to ever look positively on things and never going to actually look at the problems that are there is probably not that great either. You need some balance, but balance is what I'm aiming for here. Do not get yourself into a position where you are constantly looking at the negative and you're surrounding yourself with people who think the same way you do. If you are in that kind of negative mindset, and everyone, even the most optimistic people, probably get there sometimes, then how do you change that? What do you do? What are the behaviors you have that are going to get you into a place where you're able to get yourself out of that? Give yourself some space. Give yourself some headspace to do something different here. What activities can you do that will lighten your mood, lift your mood, get you back to a slightly better space? Because taking too much time focused on something for too long and just dwelling on all the negative stuff there can obviously ultimately be very, very damaging for your health. I think one of the good things now is that mental health in particular is very much more in the forefront of employers' minds and to some extent employees and people's minds. We are more conscious of this. We're more conscious of the risks of people getting actually depressed, clinically depressed, and really needing some serious help, professional help. I'm kind of not in that space with this. I'm trying to think about people who are far short of being in that medical kind of condition, but actually just needing to get themselves in a better mood space and thinking about how they're actually going to be a bit more positive about life and a bit more optimistic about life in general. And escapism is good here. Thinking yourself into a place where you're watching a film that takes you completely away from the day-to-day, doing an activity that takes you completely away from the day-to-day. These are things you can do that will absolutely help to move you to a better place. The other thing I think is really important here is sometimes you can get wrapped up in your own world. The expression first world problem always amuses me. People have some issue that's bugging them or other, and they'll talk about that's a first world problem. And I think actually it's a sort of cliched expression now, but it does work to some extent, because the reality is when you look more widely at the people in the world around you, very often you are going to find people out there who have a very, very much more challenging set of circumstances and who are actually having to deal with some awful scenarios that you hopefully are not close to approaching. So getting that wider perspective, getting yourself away from being in your own bubble and taking yourself to a place where you have a better chance to be really reflective is a good thing. And again, a positive thing that you can do that will help you. And again, it might be something you need a bit of help with. And you need to be open to that. If you know you're a negative, pessimistic kind of person, then try and find avenues to turn around and open yourself up to getting some feedback and some thinking that puts you into a more positive space. Don't get yourself sucked into totally internalizing everything, not talking about it with somebody else. That builds you to a bigger set of problems. That is obviously one of the really big longer term challenges you need to be very conscious of. It's worth thinking about the concept of time here as well. Time is one of the only things in life that you cannot get back. Every second that ticks by on the clock is a second you cannot have back. So don't let your time be wasted on too much negativity or being too much of a doom monger about everything. You need to live for now and enjoy what's going on now. If you're a relentless pessimist, try and focus more on the present and enjoy it. Look for things that are going to help you enjoy the present. Don't look to the future and immediately think it's all going to be terrible. Look at the world's problems, as I said right at the outset, that we're doomed. The climate crisis is upon us. Geopolitically, it's all a disaster at the minute. The world's going to end. We're on the cusp of World War III. If you do too much of this, you are definitely not helping yourself. Even as an optimist, you're not helping yourself. If you're a pessimist, you're definitely not. So think very hard about how can I do that? How can I lighten my mood? What can I actively do that is going to help me get to a place where the time I'm spending and the actual moments I have in that particular day, I'm making the most of those and I'm looking forward rather than backwards to try and get a more positive outlook by and large. Be conscious as well of your impact around you, your feelings, your mood. If you're optimistic, too optimistic, that can be very frustrating for people who are obviously more pessimistic than you. But equally, if you're very pessimistic and constantly pessimistic, you can be dragging the mood down, which is really difficult, both professionally and personally. This can be something that is really challenging. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you'll know about the Dementors who suck all the joy out of life. Don't be one of those people. Don't be somebody who sucks the joy out of the room. If you're feeling down, you're feeling negative, keep that where you can away from that kind of environment. Get the help from people that you can get help from to get you out of that space. But be conscious that people who are maybe not so close to you are going to look at you with a different set of eyes in a different way if you are relentlessly negative about everything. So do think a little bit, how can I make a difference with that? I guess one of the ways you can also cope with this is, in some instances, is to try and be a bit compartmented in your life. It's something that many people have to do. I certainly have had to do that many times in my career, where I've had to keep work life separate from personal life, or aspects of work life separate from other aspects of work life, for reasons, in my case, when I was in the Air Force, around often security issues. I'd be dealing with some very highly classified stuff or some very sensitive stuff that I just could not talk about to lots of other people. And I can remember vividly, I'd come home from work from some of the jobs that I had, and my wife would say to me, well, what did you do today? And I'd basically just be, well, work. And that was it. I wouldn't talk about anything else because I just needed to keep it separate completely. If you look at people in the health profession, for example, they very often do this as well. They try not to take their work home and take the negativity home. Emergency services, another classic example for this, dealing with very, very difficult scenarios, a lot, dealing with very traumatic situations quite a lot. The last thing they want to do is take those home and have to re-rehearse them when they get home. So having that compartmentalization in your life is a good thing by and large, as long as you're not bottling up stuff too much, because at the end of the day, that takes you back to the stress management piece. You need to think about, where are my outlets? How can I actually offload at a time I need to offload? Some time ago, a good many years ago now, I've mentioned this on a previous podcast. I worked for a guy who was a fantastic boss, really, really good boss. And he was clearly not himself. He was very much not in the sort of normal jovial frame of mind that he was normally in. And it was evident to me, certainly because I knew him very well. And I took him on one side and said, can I just have a chat? And we did. And I just said to him, what's up? You're not you. In a private setting, we're well away from everyone else. And it gave him, I guess I uncorked the fizzy bottle of Coca-Cola, I suppose. And it gave him the opportunity to offload a whole load of things to me, because he was just massively stressed. He was in that loneliness of command position. He was at the top of the organization at the time, and he didn't have anybody else to talk to. Had a lot of, in isolation, small things that were all building up and up and up and up and up. And ultimately, he wasn't coping with that very well himself at that particular moment. And it gave him, my relationship with him gave him an outlet for it. I would encourage you to think about that for yourself. How good are you at coping? I mentioned it earlier. How good are you at coping with this? Do you have people who you can offload to? If you don't know that you're in a position where you can do that, and you know that, right, I need to take some time out, I need to give myself some space, get myself some rest, go on a holiday, whatever it happens to be. If you're not good at that yourself, make sure you are thinking about, who could I rely on to do that, and what kind of permission am I giving them to do that? When I did a podcast with John Caudle not that long ago, his great expression on this was fantastic. When he was a child, his father, when they were out in public somewhere and he was being a bit naughty and his father was wanting to chastise him but didn't want to do anything in public, he would say to him, do you want a peanut butter sandwich? And that was his code for John to understand that you're pushing the boundaries here. You're going to get a clip round the ear, figuratively speaking, if you don't behave. And what John did was take that forward into his professional life. So when he was in the US Navy, he would actually turn around to his first lieutenants on ships he was commanding, and he'd say to them, look, if you think I'm making a wrong turn, I'm doing something that needs to be thought about a bit more closely, then your way of telling me that without publicly dressing me down, as it were, in front of others, is to turn around and, hey, Captain, you want a peanut butter sandwich? And that's the message to me is, okay, we need to go somewhere and talk about this and find out what's going on. So it's finding those kind of outlets. I think those examples are great examples for the sort of things you can do to think about how you can better compartmentalize to some extent, but also provide yourself with outlets. Provide yourself with outlets so you do not get too stressed, too challenged in terms of the way you actually deal with all of this. Humor can obviously help. Again, you look at the emergency services and the military to a large extent, some of the time, pretty black humor in those organizations, because it gives people a let off steam outlet. We can get overly wrapped up these days around the worries associated with that, around political correctness and wokeism and so on and so forth. I'm not wishing to cross that Rubicon here. There are clearly things and behaviors that are totally unacceptable, and everyone should recognize that. But equally, some of the time, a bit of humor can be a really good thing, as long as it's not at somebody's personal expense and it's not giving them a hard time or in any way harassing someone. That is not what I'm advocating. What I'm thinking is, you can find outlets that potentially will help to let off steam, to get yourself to a place where you're giving yourself a bit more headspace. Meditation, sport, yoga, these are all things that people do and that are worth considering. Reading a book, listening to a book, getting out for a walk, getting some fresh air. All are obvious when you think about it, but often we just don't necessarily do that. And this can become a spiral problem. If you are even a relatively optimistic person, some of the time you are going to get stressed. You're going to get busy. You're going to get stuff that's putting you more and more under pressure. You need to know when you're in that situation and how am I going to deal with it. If you're a pessimist, it's potentially worse than if you're an optimist because you're more likely to be there in the first place and you're more likely to then start focusing on the negative aspects of it rather than the positive aspects. If you're an optimist, generally, and I am generalizing here and I know that, you are going to be in a position where you are more likely to say, okay, this is temporary. It is not something that is personal to me. It is something that is just a bump in the road and is as therefore something I can move on from and find a way around and I can actually struggle my way through it. So go back to what I said at the beginning, my pipeline not being very full at the minute. Does that worry me? Yeah, a little bit, of course, that I need to think about making sure I'm doing more to fill it. But do I have a positive view of it? Absolutely, I do. Am I confident that it'll get filled? Yes. Do I think it's going to be some kind of drama that's going to have a significant impact on us as a family? No, I don't. I can have that same conversation with my wife, who is much less positive in these sort of spaces than me. And that's a challenge for her because she sometimes finds this quite difficult and is in a different mindset. And the good thing about that, from my point of view, is I love that kind of challenge test and so on that she brings, because it does mean that we're not excessively optimistic, charging off down the road of unerring positivity. She keeps me honest and keeps me focused on what I have to do and makes me think about this type of stuff I need to focus more on and spending a bit more time on this and being a bit more serious and a bit more diligent about this, and this, to turn around and make sure that I am actually getting to a place where hopefully I generate what we need to have to move forward. So too much optimism, too many optimists together, probably a bad thing. Too many pessimists together, definitely a bad thing, because then it becomes again real doom. Everything's going to be disastrous. We're all going to fall off a cliff. This is an awful position to be in. I hope that I've kind of shed a little bit of light on there. I just think, what am I asking you to do with this podcast? I'm asking you to check in with yourself. I'm asking you to have a look at how you are as an individual. Are you optimistic by nature? Are you pessimistic by nature? Neither is wrong. Everyone has a graduated scale somewhere here. Some people are extremely optimistic. Some people are extremely pessimistic. Some are much more in the middle. And the classic is people would say, well, they're realists. They're not optimists or pessimists. They're realists. Well, okay. So which way does realism fall? It can vary, of course. And it is somewhere, you're just somewhere on that scale. But you need to be mindful of your own personal situation and know where you are on it. If you know you're very pessimistic by nature, then okay, what are my coping strategies for that? How can I actually articulate that to people in a way that doesn't look unnecessarily negative, and also find ways forward to getting to the places I need to get to? If I know that in my case, for example, I'm unerringly optimistic, then okay, how do I check that? How do I make sure I'm not excessively optimistic and I've still got some balance? And when I talk to other people in a world where they may be feeling very, very different about a given situation, my excessive optimism, if I allow it to come out publicly, may be unhelpful. So bringing all that together is what I'm asking you to do from this. I want you to think about, for you, are you one of those people who looks forward? Are you wishing you took a different fork 5 minutes after you've gone down a one particular fork in the road? Are you decisive? Are you indecisive? Are you comfortable with ambiguity, or are you always looking for certainty? All those things that I've talked about throughout this episode are the things I think you need to think about for you. And then think about, what does that mean for me? How can I get myself to a position where I'm still moving forward, using the time, the precious seconds in your life that you cannot get back, to give yourself a happy, positive, enjoyable life? Because ultimately that's what we all want. Everyone wants to be in that kind of position. And sometimes when you look at your own life and you think, well, God, this is just awful, then just having some external perspective on that, whether that's from someone else or you opening the aperture and looking a bit more wide, can actually make a big difference. That's what I wanted to get across today. Slightly shorter than normal episode, but I really hope that's helpful to you. And I'll be back again very soon with some other stuff. Take care. Thanks very much for listening. All the best. Bye now. I really hope you've enjoyed this thematic episode. First one I've done for a while, talking about glass half full versus glass half empty. As ever, if you've enjoyed it, please share it. Please push it around widely to other people and make sure there's a decent chance that other people can listen to the podcast. If you think it's good, then hopefully some other people will think it is as well, and that all helps me. If you find this kind of content really valuable and it's stuff that you are actually implementing things into your life as a result of what I'm offering you, then please consider helping the podcast financially and therefore helping me financially as a result of that, because that will help me to continue the show, helps justify the time, which is considerable to do this, and it would make a world of difference to me. And you can do that in a couple of ways. You can go to support the show in the podcast platform. You'll find that link, and that will take you to www.patreon.com/leading4life. And you can become either a supporter, a champion, or a patron of the show. And for the price of a cup of coffee from any well-known high street brand per month, actually less than the price of a coffee from any one of those brands these days, you can make a big, big difference to what I do. And as I say, if it's worth the price of a coffee for you every month, I would be enormously grateful. Thanks very much for listening. Have a great week. Speak soon. Bye.